this year she was one of the finalists in the Benelux New Scientist Awards. She did not win, however. It marks an important point that typography and readability finally are recognized as science, and I think one of the consequences was that she was actually on TV being interviewed. So, on you go, pop star.
So, still waiting for the first slide. For the ones who don't know me, I'm Anne Bessemans. I'm from Belgium. I teach for 50%. The other 50% I do research, design research. I teach typography, graphic design, type design, and I defended my PhD in 2012, and out of the PhD I got a strong interest in rhythm aspects within type. So in these 30 minutes I will talk about rhythm, reading comfort, and how it can be influenced through type design. So throughout this presentation I will give a definition of reading comfort, 2, a possible way of how to measure it, and 3, I will give evidence that arithmetic types seems better for some groups of people. So last ATypI I talked about rhythm and legibility, and in that presentation I took you on a journey through definitions of rhythm by calligraphers and type designers to come to my own definition of rhythm. For me, rhythm is visual and repetitive, and a well-considered game between black and white. My definition of rhythm wants to change your way of looking at type and even designing type. When I talk about rhythm to study legibility and reading comfort, I will focus on the vertical rhythm of the letters, namely the vertical letter strokes as shown on this slide. The rhythm of a typeface is determined by the sequence of the vertical letter strokes. And it's formed by the alternation of the black letter shapes with the white space intern and extern, and this alternation creates a stripe pattern. The image shows how the vertical rhythm can be determined, and when looking only to the vertical stems, you got a good first impression of what I mean by rhythm of the typeface. For a whole paragraph of text, a visualization of the rhythm is placed above the letters. It can be visualized by a curved line to illustrate the average frequency of a rhythm, or by a pattern of black stripes. And when removing the text from the background, the rhythm, so the stripe pattern, is clearly visible. So reading comfort seems to be a complex matter, and there are several definitions and operationalizations for the term. And currently, there is no close definitions of what reading comfort exactly means. We are dealing with an ambiguous term to which a psychologist, an interior designer, a graphic designer, a typographer will give a meaning which is related to their work field. All those definitions have a common sense, namely that the reading process should proceed as smooth, easy, or comfortable as possible. Gerhard Unger defines reading comfort as making reading pleasant. Reading for long periods of time shouldn't be a tiring activity. Tracy, in 1986, describes readability as an important requirement in the comprehension of long stretches of text without experiencing physical complaints. So both definitions are similar in the way that they stress physiological signs and a time lapse. Out of literature, I found that the amount of squinting plays an important role in fatigue. Blink rate usually does something, but sometimes it decreases and sometimes it increases. Concerning blink rate as an indicator of the ease of reading, Lukács discovered early on in his career that the blink rate could be measured to indicate visual fatigue. Although not explicitly stated by Lukács, later on he came to the belief that the ease of reading for the most part was related not to fatigue in the eye muscles, but to the encumbrance of reading caused by mental tension. Lukács was mistaken in putting all causes of strain and all factors inducing fatigue into one bundle. Pupil dilation may be involved, but it also changes with cognitive load and attention. Possible devices to measure pupil dilation and indirect blink rate are eye trackers, but they are not exclusively measuring reading comfort. Frowning as a facial expression cannot be measured through the eye tracker. However, it seems possible to use a standard webcam and then code the observation of frowning in the video recording of the test subject. So the best physiological measures of eye comfort today are EMG of the orbicularis oculi and the corrugator. But unfortunately, these sensors are a bit of pain to deal with and may hinder a natural reading environment. Also, this method is in strong contradiction with the theme comfort. It seems difficult to get data through cameras. Finding a method that measures comfort independent from reading performance seems to be innovative. Microsoft, ClearType and Advanced Reading Technologies in the USA, has done a lot of work with the Pacific University on trying to measure eye strain or eye fatigue, but they haven't found a single measure that works yet. And the same counts for the University of Eindhoven, who is coordinated by Bauhaus. Although it seemed easy to incorporate reading comfort in quantitative data, it is definitely not. So let's go back to Tracy's definitions of reading comfort. On page 31 in his book Letters of Credit, he describes readability in terms of quality of visual comfort. And also in the book Type of Typefaces from 1967, readability is described as the ease with which the eyes can absorb the message and move along the line. Visual comfort may be the key to study reading comfort, as both terms are much more related than we think. Because typography is absorbed by the eyes, reading comfort can be easily connected with visual comfort. But before answering the question how we can maximize and test quality of visual comfort, we must understand what the qualities are that make a typeface more comfortable. Understanding the causes of visual comfort is important to understand and prevent reading difficulties of people with a special attention to clinical populations such as people with a visual impairment. As stated in my last year presentation, there is strong evidence that visual comfort or discomfort has to do with the rhythm of the typeface or the stripe pattern which is created by the type. In my last year's presentation, I gave an overview of how the rhythm changed during the time. And as we will see in a few minutes, there was evidence that letters needed to slant the contrast for reducing the verticality, what is clearly referring to the stripe patterns in text. That way, reading became a more comfortable process. So to understand how the rhythm dominated letter models over decades, I will repeat my last year's rhythm overview, but now in a nutshell. So the meta serif can be seen as a representation of the typical typefaces of this time. And the letter widths are almost everywhere the same, and this rhythm creates an even stripe pattern. Some of these contemporary typefaces are probably unconsciously referring to the popular sans serif typefaces like Helvetica, where roughly every letter got the same width. The currently used 21st letter model uses equal letter widths, where this was not the case for types before 1700. We can see that the contemporary trend within the rhythm and thus the equal letter widths differ greatly from all types before 1700. Out of this old phase model, we can see that A's, E's, and S's were condensed, and O's, M's, and N's were wide. Because of these irregular letter widths, the rhythm of text becomes more distinctive. So this rhythm is more irregular than the typefaces that are popular these days. This century can be seen as a transition century where two concepts came to the forefront. Typefaces became popular with either a vertical contrast or old-phase contrast or a combination of both. And this can, for example, be seen in the letters with the top serifs, which are not flat, nor is the shading vertical. Also, when you look at the E, you clearly see what I try to point out here. Letters in that century were designed both wider and more condensed in their widths, so there is no strict uniformity in a used letter model. To the end of this period, everything is evolving to the use of equal letter widths. Within this century, letter widths are very regular. This was a standard used by the modern typefaces like Bodoni, Walbaum, and Didot. What happened also in this century, as well by the end of the 18th century, is that letters became more condensed. Where types before 1700 had condensed S's, A's, and E's, other letters became now condensed as those. Because of the vertical contrast, the verticality was often a reason to complain about the reading comfort. In type history, clues can be found how visual comfort can be defined, namely by the verticality of the typeface. And here is my topic for this year's ATypI lecture. So from 1900 on, and as a reaction of the complaints of the 19th century type, letters got a slanted contrast to reduce the verticality in the letters. But equal letter widths were maintained, which causes a strong, stressful stripe pattern. So there is something contradictory about the rhythm of the font. The alternation between the black and the white, so the rhythm, within the words creates a stripe pattern, a verticality. On the one hand, this grading seems to support reading, but on the other hand, there are studies, including my own PhD, that show that these stripe patterns impede the reading process due to visual discomfort. So this is another motif to relate reading comfort to visual comfort. In visual perception studies, visual discomfort refers to the adverse effects of viewing certain kind of visual patterns. Dominant stripe patterns have spatial properties that can work distracting under certain frequencies. Reading as a visual task incorporates a deviation from particular statistics typical of natural scenes and falls within a range of 2 to 3 cycles per degree, which are particularly associated with visual discomfort. Spatial frequencies around this range have therefore been associated with the highest levels of aversion, and in general, discomfort may reflect hyperexcitation of the visual cortex. Factors affecting discomfort when reading were found to be spatial frequencies, width of the stripe compared to the width of the spacing, size pattern, and level of contrast. Visual discomfort is generated by unpleasant geometric patterns which are formed by black and white lines on a large surface like text. Some people experience unpleasant artifacts when reading. Visual discomfort influences the reading rate, the accuracy, and the comprehension of readers. Bauhaus envisions reading comfort by reading rate in function of the letter sizes. He points to a decrease in word recognition performance in the case of small and large letters. And other researchers also did research on the letter size in comparison to their striped pattern and concluded by measuring reading speed and accuracy that young readers benefited from a font that was not set too small. When reading, visual discomfort is associated with reading difficulties and short effective reading times. In the examples explained before, one may have noticed that visual comfort is measured by reading performance and not by reading comfort. A clear distinction can be made between actual legibility and perceived legibility. Perceived legibility refers clearly to reading comfort, as perceived will refer to an independent, purely subjective measure which relies on an individual's analysis of both functional and semantic properties in conjunction in order to determine how comfortable they think a typeface is. This perceived legibility will reveal aesthetic preferences of readers, but how do we measure reading comfort or visual comfort subjectively? Due to visual discomfort, it is known that the stimuli that general populations find uncomfortable include periodic patterns with a clear and strong contrast, such as black and white stripes created by letters and text. And this goes for both directions, horizontal and a vertical way. In general, these stripe patterns are experienced unpleasant as they may provoke visual illusions in the guise of color, shape, and/or movement when reading. Reading can cause pattern glare that can result in illusions, eye strain, headaches, and even epileptic seizures. Wilkins and other researchers reduces discomfort by reducing the amount of lines on a page. Another way of making line patterns less dominant is enlargement. Wilkins showed that people who were hindered by a stripe pattern when reading moved their head towards the uncomfortable periodic patterns because enlarging the image reduces the unpleasant experience. So it means that less lines can be seen. Due to the effect of enlargement, one can escape this stressful periodic stripe pattern, as the lines are now further away from each other. This has to do with enlargement and completely understandable out of typographic practice. This refers back to the work of the punch cutters as they cut big letters lighter in weight and with more refinement. Types for small sizes became more heavy and wider to make the reading more comfortable. Some populations appear to be particularly sensitive to adverse visual stimuli, reporting more symptoms of visual discomfort than others. These groups of people are also more susceptible to generate irritations or illusions while reading. Risk groups are defined as people who suffer from headaches, migraine, epilepsy, eye strain, asthenopia, visual stress, people who are visually sensitive, and beginning readers and poor readers. An interesting study to confront people with visual discomfort when reading was conducted by Conlon in 1999. In his study, a measurement tool of visual discomfort was made up by schematically displaying subjective symptoms of visual discomfort. And he named it the RES rating scale. I like the fact of stressing possible measurements to provide information different from actual legibility. For me, visual comfort or reading comfort should be done by having interaction with readers. In the way the RES rating scale was used in the study of Conlon, a questionnaire was drawn up which consisted of questions regarding events that can indicate visual discomfort. The questionnaire addressed possible somatic, perceptual, and performance difficulties, and all those questions were answered on a 3-point scale ranging from 0, it never occurs, to 2, often to always. Every question got an item code, which refers to visual discomfort. Findings about visual discomforts, like visual fatigue from a stripe pattern, or words or letters that move, can hardly be measured by actual legibility research. So I will now sum up my 3 takeaway messages. So I tried to make a definition for reading comfort. And reading comfort for me is the psychologically related and subjective information about the visual aspects of a typeface, provided consciously by individual readers. My second takeaway message is the fact of stressing possible measures to provide information different from actual legibility is innovative. Reading comfort should be measured by means of interaction with the readers about visual comfort provided by the typefaces. And my third takeaway message is the aim for starting to design more arithmetic fonts is much more nuanced. It isn't so that we should all start designing arithmetic fonts straight away. But of course, I would like to make a strong stand about the fact that rhythm should be more overthought. My hypothesis is that people with normal vision are totally fine with a typeface with a strong homogeneous rhythm. But I have no clue if they will improve their reading much more with a more arrhythmic type. There is enough evidence to guess that several groups of people, like those with visual stress, migraine, headaches, eye strain, and readers that are visual sensitive, beginning readers and poor readers, that they can benefit from typefaces with a more arrhythmic type. So the goal of my new studies is to gain more detailed insight and elaborate on the relations between arrhythmic fonts, spatial frequencies, comfort, and the legibility of printed matter. The study also needs to give more insight on the degree of irregular rhythm that is needed for reaching an optimal reading comfort and legibility for poor and normal readers. So I hope that these insights will enrich the knowledge of type designers to provide better reading ability by improvements of text material, as well as guidelines of how discomfort can be avoided in reading materials. So to be continued. Thank you.
Hello, Anne.
Hi.
Thank you for this very nice presentation.
Thank you.
I was stuck with the thing, with an aspect of your speech, as you said, when you increase type size, okay, so it increases comfort. But you said, like, in the study you're quoting, I can't remember the study, they would bring it closer so they could mask, see less. Less lines.
Yes.
I was wondering, because legibility has lots of parameters, I was wondering if a mask effect, like chunking, dividing into smaller chunks the information, was also an important aspect.
Yeah. What Wilkins did is that he, in his studies, he tested with several different typefaces. He has some knowledge about typography, but what he did, he made he tested with a very condensed type, and then he was looking how people react. And when it was, for example, like a more wider typeface, like not condensed, that he could clearly see that once the type became more condensed, that people move their head towards the paper. Because that's also what Kevin explained, that the ones in the back could see more lines than the ones in the front, so that's also the effect that was happening. And that should make reading more comfortable. So, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, well then, thank you very much.
There is one more question.
I'm sorry, this is very quick. Is reading comfort, you use this term as readability, is the same thing? Can we use reading comfort instead of readability?
Yeah, for me it is, because readability, if you look at type design, because readability can also be seen in a much broader thing than typography, where also like leading and margins and color of paper. So it's specifically to type design, yeah.